Hi there, it's Hyacinth Fraser here from Property in Action. Please do subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell to be informed of more videos. Hi there, David Kemp. Thank you for thank you for doing this conversation with me, series of YouTube videos. David, just say something about who you are and what you do, please.
Yeah, of course. I'm David Kemp. I'm a planning consultant, which means I help people get planning permission, developers and investors, and pretty much in layman's terms, what that means is that if they've got a building that they want to erect, that they've got land that they want to develop, the way in which you can make much more money out of developing that land is changing the use, doing other things like extending floor space, and planning permission is hopefully the piece of paper in the end that adds a lot of value to sites. It can make them worth 5 times, 10 times, 20 times more than they were to start with. And there's an awful lot of money and profit in it, but it's also a very complex area, very technical. And it's a mixture of politics, a mixture of law, a mixture of policy, a lot of practical thinking as well. So in terms of my own professional background, it's been quite mixed. I've been doing this for about 20 years, one way or another, as a lawyer, both as a barrister and a solicitor. I've worked for local authorities, as well as on the other side of the fence, and for developers and investors. And I've also been a valuer and agent. I've been part of a development team and also run my own planning consultancy. So
you've got you've got a broad range of experience pretty much, haven't you, in the whole planning arena.
That's right.
David, we're going to cover 3 broad areas. I've just got some notes off to the side for me, so I'm just going to have a quick look. So we're going to look at prior approval in high-risk areas. You're going to look at what those high-risk areas might be. You're also going to look at when you need or when people need planning permission. And the third area we're going to cover is common problems for people that are pretty new to the planning arena. So can you just start off with looking at prior approval in high risk areas? What are the kind of high risk areas that you're aware of?
Yeah, so with prior approval, different types of prior approval. So most of this is going to be geared towards office to residential. But with a lot of prior approval, basically it says you can do pretty much anything you like within this framework, but there are a few boxes that you have to tick. Now, a lot of those boxes are in common, but we're just going to choose office to resi as an example, because we haven't got 5 days to cover the whole of the prior approval law. So we've only got a few minutes. With office to residential, the main risks that you have to deal with are noise, ground contamination, traffic and parking, and fourthly, flood risk. So the main high risk areas, taking each of those in turn, the most noisy locations will obviously be if you're looking to build houses right slap bang next to other industrial units or other areas, depending on what those uses are. And also, there's a lot of applications now go in for developments of offices which happen to be next to railway stations and railway lines. And because it's not a building, a lot of people think to themselves, well, actually, you don't need a noise assessment for that. But you do, because you've got the noise the train's running past. It counts as a commercial use. You've also got things like station tannoy announcements, which happen all day, all hours of day and night as well. And more officers, particularly the environmental health officers, are becoming a lot more live to that sort of stuff. So that's a bit of a risk. We have to look into that and deal with that. Ground contamination, again, next to or near to railways. Historically, a lot of the sidings have been used for the storage of all sorts of dirty uses. Sometimes they've had tanks of chemicals and stuff like that stored next to them as well. And then historically, they become developed for offices and so on and so forth. So it all looks like a perfectly clean site when you go down there, but there could be stuff in the soil which you need to find out about. Again, being next to other industrial uses, other industrial areas, can also be sources of ground contamination, particularly if you've got underground rivers or sources of water which act as a pathway for those contaminants. A lot of also offices or office type developments on in rural areas, countryside areas, sometimes have been developed on former agricultural land as well. So you might have pesticides and stuff like that in the soil. Traffic and parking, again, can be high risk, particularly if you're out of centre. So the further you are out of a particular centre, the more you're in a village or a rural environment where there's low public transport. So the greater the risk, particularly if you're trying to go for high density stuff. You're going to go for 1 beds or 2 beds and that sort of stuff as well. That could also be a risk for developers in another way, because when you have to go to the bank to get bank finance, they'll get their valuer on board, and the valuer will want to see comparable evidence of similar deals for those kinds of units. And if you're going to try and go for like micro units, like smaller 1-bedroom units, and you're in a village area where there are no transactions of 30 or 40 square metre 1-bed and 2-bed units, and they're all 2 beds and 3 beds, then the bank might not sign off on it because their valuer might say, well, there's no evidence to justify the values that they're looking for. So, you know, that there can be a bit of a crossover there. And then lastly, flood risk. Flood zones 2 and 3, you can develop on them, you can do change of use on them. I've got it before.
Yeah, sorry, David, just talk to us about zones 2 and 3. What are they?
So you've got different risks, and so flood zones are sort of like a map. It's like a heat map or something like that, put together on the government flood map, and it goes from flood zone 1, which is very low risk of flooding from rivers and seas, to flood zones 2 and 3, which is higher risk. And in terms of policy, there's normally a presumption against high risk uses on flood zones 2 and 3. And there's a government service. You can go onto this on Google and put in flood risk map for planning service or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it's called. And you put in the postcode and it drops the pin on your location. Just check it's got the right location, and you'll see it's got different shades of blue in terms of contour lines, and that'll tell you whether or not you're kind of in a flood map, high risk flood map area. So those are things that you've got to kind of look at. You can overcome a lot of them, but those are what we would call high risk. So if you're for flood zones, if you're a 2 or a 3, it's a high risk area.
So why would people be even interested in developing in high risk areas? What are the benefits of that?
Well, a lot of developers don't look in those locations in any event because they realise, they think to themselves, it's high risk, I'm never going to get planning permission for it, I'm never going to get prior approval for it, and therefore they just don't look at it. So it's a really good hunting ground for developers who know what they're doing and know what to look for.
All right. So the second area we spoke about is when you need planning permission. Just talk to us a little bit about that.
So you need planning permission for anything that's called development. So development is defined in the law as 2 different things. Either you've got building works, what's called operational development. So any changes, physical changes to the externals of a building, new windows, new doors, particularly of a certain degree, and if you're in a conservation area, then the bar is a lot lower in terms of what might be regarded as affecting the external appearance of the building. So it's anything that basically affects the external appearance of the building. Obviously, new buildings going up, new roofs, and new extensions, particularly to houses, those require planning permission normally. Now, I know you've got permitted development, but I'll come on to that in a moment. So in general rules, building works, yes. The other thing is changes of use you do as well. So you normally need a change of use if you want to go from office to residential. However, so you've got those 2 things. You've got building works on the one hand, and then you've got operational development on the other. So you've got changes of use on the other. So if it falls into either of those 2 categories, then you need planning permission. Unless the law says you don't. And where the law says you don't is if you then go to the next stage and say, well, it's development because it falls into those 2 categories, but is it permitted? So that's when, if it's a change of use, if you're changing the use, that's when you look to prior approval. and whether or not you can do anything under prior approval.
Give us some examples of change of use.
So office to residential would be a change of use. Shops to residential would be a change of use. Changes of use from, say, care homes to residential as well.
Okay.
A change of use also could be from one kind of residential to another. So, for instance, if you've got a house and you wanted to split it into flats, say 3 flats, then each of those 3 flats is actually in the same use class as the house, but because you are intensifying the use on the site, it's regarded as a material change of use, and for that reason you need permission. So it's, is it building works? Is it a change of use?
Yes.
If it is it permitted? And if it is permitted, then that's fine. But that's when you then need to check things like Article 4 directions, whether or not there's also a planning condition on the original consent for what's being built on the land already to stop the change of use that you want to make. So, for instance, you might buy an office block. The office block has an original permission on it, and on that permission there's a condition which says you can't change the use to anything, it has to stay as offices. You can't change it to residential, for instance. So there might not be an Article 4 direction against it, but it's the condition on that original consent which stops the change. So you have to go around that.
Okay, just in a real kind of potted way, can you say something about Article 4 and what that means?
So Article 4 is, it would be a piece of paper, it would be a direction, it's a legal document that's brought in by the council. They have to go through a particular statutory process with it. Basically, what it does, it says that the council wants to withdraw certain planning freedoms in its area. So, for instance, if you've got permitted development rights to be able to extend a house without planning permission, to be able to make a change of use from offices to residential without planning permission, then the council is saying, we've got a real policy concern with that, either if it's in a conservation area or for some other reason, and therefore we want to take the control back to the council and withdraw those permitted development rights. Article 4 refers to a particular statutory provision within the law from where that power comes, and it's just colloquially called an Article 4 direction.
Okay. Yeah. So
what I would say though, Hyacinth, is that there are 2 different types. So if you come across an Article 4 direction, don't be alarmed, because some are immediate and some are non-immediate. So you have to check whether or not it's due to take place, it's due to come into effect immediately. Often they're not. So you might see an Article 4 direction, it's not due to come into force for another 3 or 4 months or for another 12 months, in which case there's still time to get your application in for permitted development or prior approval. So you've got to look at the detail sometimes.
Okay, so someone who's fairly new to developments, someone who's fairly new to the planning arena, what's your advice on whether they should go ahead with or without someone who understands planning? What's your advice on that? It sounds complicated.
I think it's great. The thing is, there are 2 aspects to getting into to property development. There's the energy and there's the experience as well. So with energy comes the time and all that sort of stuff. With the experience, sometimes often comes the resources, the money, the finance. I wouldn't want to put anybody off from pursuing these strategies. And if you think you've got the confidence to go big and to go large and to go for more complex developments, then great. That being said, that just because somebody goes for an HMO conversion or conversion on a smaller scale, that doesn't mean it's not complicated. There can be all sorts of intricacies there. I think with anything, the 3 common things that I see in terms of problems with what we call perhaps newbie developers or perhaps people who are less experienced. On the one hand, first of all, they tend to overreach themselves. They go for a strategy which, quite frankly, they're not ready for. They haven't got the experience for that. And you can overcome that with partnering up, JVing with more experienced people. I would say
joint venturing, you mean? When you say JV, joint venturing.
Joint venturing, or have a mentor as well. So, you know, you can join courses, you can join things like Assets for Life, for instance. If you you go onto their courses, you go onto other courses, there's plenty of other courses as well. They do a degree of education, educate yourself about these strategies, get to know the nuts and bolts, the feel for it as well, so that you know what you're talking about, and you also get to understand which part of that role that you can do. Some people actually are happy looking for the sourcing. They'll try and find the opportunities, and they'll bring them to a prospective joint venture partner who has the experience, the money, and then they put the two together, and that could be a very good marriage. And you may have to give more away than 50% in the first few days, and the first few projects, but you're earning as you're learning as well, which is also a very good way. Time, the second one is time. Trying to do too much, chase too many strategies or too many shiny pennies. Do one thing well, get good at it, let it grow, and then systemize it. And once you've got that perfected, then go on to do the next thing. Which brings me on to,
I was going to say, just before you move on to the next one, have you got an example of, you know, get good at one project, systematize it, and then move on to the next? If you've got an example of what that might mean.
Absolutely. Rent to rent, service accommodation, they're perfect. They can be very time consuming. They're very similar to all the burdens that you find on the just usual property management as well, but they cash flow very well, and they can cash flow very well. The thing is with those strategies is you don't necessarily end up owning the asset, and the real money is in being the owner of an asset, the freeholder at the end of the day. But that's where you tend to find the more complex strategies, the residential conversions, the commercial conversions. That's kind of as you move on. So with your rent to rent model, with your sourcing, with your service accommodation model, systemize them, because they can be very, very time consuming. But once you've got a system to it and it's generating the cash flow, then you've got the property knowledge that goes with that, and you can bring that into working in joint ventures on perhaps bigger, more complex projects.
Okay, lovely, thank you.
And so with a third one, obviously we talked about systemizing things, cash flowing. This helps with the third one, because a lot of people, they'll either run out of money or they'll jump into property development. I mean, we've all seen posts from people saying, I've given up my JOB, and you know, I've left my job and I've gone into property full time. And we're all sitting there thinking two things. We're thinking, great, I'm happy for you. But on the other hand, have you got money coming in? You know, some people are different in circumstances, and this is a complete generalization, but you've got to be careful about leaping into property straight away, because if you're doing a mostly cash flow strategy, like rent to rent or service accommodation, it's going to take time for them to cash flow. And also, there's the burden of managing that system and trying to systemize it while you're trying to do everything else and kind of trying to settle down and get your feet under the table with it. So you've got all those difficulties that you're having to handle at the same time as just trying to get your head stuck into the property game. So it's a good idea that if you don't overreach yourself, you start with what you know, you systemize it, and you cash flow, and then whilst you're doing so, you're out there networking, talking to people about what you're doing. You're going to be attractive to joint venture partners. You're meeting people who have opportunities you can work with them on, and it'll come together. It just comes together.
Yeah. I know when we started the conversation, you spoke about like your area of expertise in terms of planning, being a barrister, solicitor, and having many years in this field. Do you want to talk to us about some of the education that you offer in terms of your webinars? And I'm not sure if you offer like one-to-one coaching, etc., etc. Do you want to just talk to us about what you're up to?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, recently I did a series of sort of 15, 20 minute, actually ended up being 30-minute webinars, and then with questions afterwards. The idea of that is what we're going to be doing is we're going to do teaching them about the nuts and bolts of some of the best strategies and tactics that we've worked on. It's going to be done over 8 weeks. It's going to be one webinar a week. Each webinar is going to be about 1 hour long. It's going to be packed with lots of content information. There's going to be checklists and crib sheets with it as well, all for free within the course as well. So we're looking to promote that. We'll be promoting that. We'll starting to promote it this month in February, looking to start running the course in March as well. So if you want to get in touch with me about that, then best thing to do is make sure that you give me your contact details so we can put you on the list for people who we've got to communicate with as well. So send me your email details, PM me by Facebook at David Kemp. Also, you can contact me to my DRK planning page, which is FB for Facebook, fb.me, stroke planning permission. No breaks, fb.me stroke planning permission. I'm on LinkedIn, and my email address is also david at DRK, that's David Robert Kemp, K-E-M-P, so drkplanning.co.uk. That's David at drkplanning.co.uk. So just to make sure you're going to be on that list, send me your details and we'll be in touch. Send you details about the masterclass, which will give you a lot more information about the 3-step model that we have for developers and investors and how you can learn the course. Yeah.
And so we're recording this in February 2019. And people are able, obviously, to contact you in the way that that you said. David, thank you so much. Lots of content, lots of detail. So if people want more, they can subscribe and hit the notification button. Thank you.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Cheers.
Right. David,